We're going to talk about the seller's disclosure, the number one biggest common misconception, and everything you need to know about it coming up next. Hey, what's going on, friends? This week we're going to talk about the seller's disclosure, not the most exciting part of a real estate transaction, but a super important part of it. So just some quick facts about it. The seller's disclosure, the disclosure that the seller gives a buyer when they sell real estate in Hawaii, is required by state law chapter 508D. And the specifics of it is covered in section I of the purchase contract. And so what happens is that there is a seller's disclosure that's 5 pages long. There's 75 questions with a bunch of sub-questions inside of that refers to repairs, replacements, appliances, all kinds of different things. You got to add your electric bills, your last 3 electric bills in there. There's all kinds of stuff that's covered, and it's required for the seller to fill this out, so that your agent should not be filling this out for you. We can assist you if you have questions about specific terminology, or there's things in there that we can verify through tax records and other documents, so we can assist and provide you with information and make sure that you fill it out correctly and don't misrepresent anything that is just a factual issue with the property. And a good real estate agent will definitely review your seller's disclosure before they transmit it, because they want to make sure that everything on there is complete and that everything is accurate, and you may not be providing information that could be misleading. It's never intentional, but that can happen. And then there's a section G on the seller's disclosure that's just open text. You can attach an additional document to it. You can write in additional information. But what's required is that the seller has to disclose all material facts, is the term. And it basically means that anything that you would consider that would affect the value of the property has to be disclosed to a buyer. That's what's required simply by the state law. And so anything that you can think of that may, be of interest or that could affect the buyer's perception of value is something that you want to disclose. A good rule of thumb is just over-disclose, right? Be very transparent, be very open. It's always suspect when you get a seller's disclosure that's very clean and everything is answered no, and there's never been any issues and the house is 25 years old. There's no way that's true, right? So when you're the seller, don't be worried about it blowing up the deal. And the best case scenario is, as a seller, you fill the seller's disclosure out prior to putting the property on the market, and so your listing agent can then provide it to interested buyers to review, and they can consider that when they make an offer. So it's something that isn't a surprise once you get into escrow if there is something on the disclosure that is of interest. So that's kind of how you want to handle it in the preparation for sale process. But there's a very big misconception around seller's disclosure, and it still exists in the real estate community here. A lot of even brokers still believe this, and that is that vacant land is not required, or isn't included for seller's disclosure. And that's not the case. Years ago that changed. It clearly states in the seller's disclosure that vacant land is included, and you must still disclose any material facts that you know. And so if you're in a transaction and you're told, hey, this is vacant land, and you don't have to do it as a seller, or as a buyer, the listing agent is saying that they don't have to provide it, that is not the case. You can reference the first paragraph on page 1 of the seller's disclosure that clearly states that vacant land is included. There are a few exceptions to that. So there's basically 8 exceptions where seller's disclosure is not required. And so here are the 8. If the property falls into one of these categories, then you don't have to worry about either providing, or you cannot expect to receive one as a buyer. So the first one is if the property is sold to a co-owner, right? If my brother and I own a property and I sell it to him, I don't have to do a disclosure. He's already an owner. The second one is if it's being sold to a parent, spouse, or child. So immediate family member, disclosure is not required. If it's being sold by court order, then a disclosure is not required. If it's being sold by a foreclosure or bankruptcy, an REO property, right? A bank-owned property, you're not going to get a seller's disclosure from the bank. If a lessor is selling to a lessee for a leasehold conversion, right? Leasehold is going to fee simple, and the lessee is already the owner of the lease on that property, then seller's disclosure is not required. If it's an initial sale, so it's a new build property, right? A developer has a tract home development, seller's disclosure is not required. If it's a condominium that has an unexpired public report, so the public report is what's required when you put a condominium development on the market, that's an exemption. And then the final exemption is timeshares. So those are the clear 8 exemptions laid out in 508D section 3. is where you could find it in the state law. But if those don't apply, you should expect a seller's disclosure either to provide one or to receive one. And as always, if you have any questions about that, you can always email me at dylan@buyabigisland.com or put them in the comments and we will get back to you. That's everything that you need to know about seller's disclosure.